Nick was a ghost. He wasn't your run-of-the-mill ghost. No, he was a rather clumsy, and undecidedly unscary ghost, and that was a problem. In the world of ghosts, poltergeists, specters and wraiths, Nick was an outcast. While all of his other kin were haunting, possessing, and generally scaring the pants off the still living, Nick couldn't elicit even a whimper from the most tender of humankind. He'd tried all the usual tricks. Hiding around corners, stowing away in little girls' closets, and even hovering over beds in the critical care unit at the hospital. No matter what Nick did though, as a specter, he was impotent. All of his rage, all of his hatred and all of his emotion did nothing to enhance his ability to frighten people. One of the most surprising things to Nick when he died, apart from the realization that the light at the end of the tunnel could actually be an overturned school bus, was that in the afterlife you had to start a new career. In the world of the afterlife, there were exactly two entry-level career choices. A new soul could either be a haunting ghost or they could be a do-gooder angel. Nick had never been the do-gooder type. He'd always disliked Thursdays for some reason. Before he died, Nick found that he could never get a good cup of coffee on a Thursday. He remembered knowing to himself that he'd find out why, though he never got around to it. He suspected that it had something to do with a massive conspiracy by the beer, liquor and wine conglomerates. Make the coffee bad on Thursdays so that people drink more on the weekends. So it came as no surprise to Nick that his supervisor would appear at his great cubicle wall, bits of his flesh hanging loosely from his bones and sinew, and announce, "We need to talk." For the next 30 minutes, Nick's supervisor went over his quarterly reviews. He made it a point to draw Nick's attention to every stated goal and then comment about how Nick had failed miserably in attempting to meet them. "Nick, you know that our afterlives depend on the scares and cares of the mortal world. If you don't meet your goals, then my department doesn't meet its goals. I don't meet my goals. I like to meet my goals, Nick." Nick mustered a passable blank stare as rebuttal. With a heavy sigh, which Nick noted was punctuated by a blooming cloud of greenish-yellow putridness, Nick's boss told him, "Nick, we're going to have to let you go. There's a lot of new talent out there. Talent that can scare with the best of them. I wish I could put in a good word for you, but I just can't think of anywhere that you'll fit in. I can't think of a single thing you'd be good at." Nick mused about the benefits of being non-corporeal, and thus having no possessions to collect from his office as he drifted out the front door. Even in the afterlife, it seemed, currency was everything. The afterlife depended on the living. Every mortal who believed in ghosts or in angels made the world of the dead more and more real. Over time, and with the deaths of an increasing number of lawyers and accountants since the 1980s, it had become a business. The angels and their gleaming white cities in the clouds, and the specters with their cubicle-filled skyscrapers on the ground. Floating aimlessly, Nick noticed for the first time that there were homeless people on the streets. Even though a home was utterly unnecessary, most of Nick's friends and co-workers maintained a residence. Whether this was for a sense of familiarity with the mortal world, or simply to have a backyard in which to keep bodies was something Nick had never managed to work out. What Nick did know, however, was that it didn't take long for news to travel. By the time he'd gotten back to his home, a new family of zombies had moved in. Nick could smell the zombie from miles away. Not that this was a unique talent. The smell of rotting flesh wasn't exactly easy to hide. And with all the moaning emanating from the house, the empty jars with a bright red brains label on them, and the tightly closed shutters on his former domains, Nick didn't really even need to smell them. Homeless, jobless and quite unalived, Nick decided to call on the help of his family. His mother and father were still alive, and probably at their house playing canasta with their neighbors. His grandmother, thought Nick happily, had died several years before in a corn thresher accident. Had Nick worn pants, the pants would have had pockets for him to put his ghostly hands in. Had Nick had solid lips, he might even have whistled a happy tune to himself as he made his way, drifting and bobbing to his grandmother's house. When he arrived, he floated through the front door. "Granny," he called. "Granny, are you here?" He checked from room to room until he found her dozing in her chair. Nick grabbed her mangled and pocked shoulder, shaking her awake. "Granny, I lost my job. Can I stay here for a bit?" Still rousing from sleep that she didn't technically need, Shirley Kane looked over her grandson. He'd really let himself go. The horrific wounds he'd suffered in his car accident had mostly mended, his flesh was closed, only some thin lighter-colored lines to indicate the beautiful twisted corpse he'd once been. The boy didn't even have enough self-respect to moan, shriek or wail. Lifting dramatically out of her chair to hover above her grandson, Shirley poked her pot arms out from her moo-moo and waggled her fingers at Nick. "No, Nick can't be. You may not stay here, she moaned loudly. You must leave this place. She punctuated it all with a glorious cackle that would, had Nick possessed an actual spine, sent shivers down it. "Okay, thanks Granny. That's okay," said Nick as he floated out the door, his grandmother's inhuman laughter following him. Drifting out of the city and into the formless ether, Nick hung his head. Unable to scare even the simplest of children, so loathed by his family that they wouldn't even give him a roof, he drifted. The failure in death as he was in life, Nick knew he was bound to spend eternity as a spectral exile,